Welcome back again. Let's talk about your options for project number one here. I'm going to start off with the Zentangle option because I figured that a lot of you will choose that. So what I want you to know about the Zentangle option, you're going to be working on this size sheet of paper. It's a 6 by 9 inch, and you're going to be using this handout that is on this manila folder right here. And there should be, in most cases, there's 3 pages. Some of these only have 2. But there are tons of images for you to reference right here. Now, for those of you that are going to do the Zentangle, I think probably the harder part in getting started is how do I set this sheet up? So how am I going to display this? How am I going to separate out shapes so that I can put these patterns in? I want to see at least 8 patterns. If you do more, that's great. But bottom line is I want to see at least 8 patterns on this 6 by 9 sheet. So I'm going to flip this over. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could just start by thinking about drawing curvy lines through here. Remember how we did this before when we just drew curvy lines in our practice? And what happened is wherever they crisscross, this whole area, I'm going to shade this in so you just see this. This whole area right here becomes shape number 1 in which I could put a Zentangle. I told you I wanted 8, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line in here. I want some interest. I want a variety of shapes. And I'm also going to draw a zigzag type shape. It might give me a little bit more than 8 shapes. That's okay. I'm going to look at this handout here because I feel like there are a lot of nice examples. Some really hard, some really easy. Sorry about that. I had to focus. And choose the ones that you really feel like you can accomplish here. All right. And you can also look back at your other sheet that we worked on to help you out. So I'm going to try to do this little boxes right here. So I'm going to go inside of this space. I'm going to draw out all these different boxes. I'm using the thin line pen today, which we have now. If you needed the thicker pen, you could definitely use it, but I think that for most of you, this pen is the ticket. This is the way to go right here. So I'm just going to develop up this space with this one pattern. I'm putting them in horizontally. There's not a right or wrong way to do this. And at the end of this, to make it a little bit more complex, because we said that Zentangles are complex patterns. They aren't simple patterns. We want to add something to it to make it complex. I'm going to add on the detail that shows me this little shaded area on the side. So it's going to look like it has a little bit of depth to it. So for me, those folks that choose the Zentangle option, I don't think it's a hard option. I just think it's more about a commitment of time and energy to this. We'll take about the next 3 to 4 days total to work on this in class. So now we're going to be flipping over from me doing all the instruction, from you now taking responsibility and using your time wisely in our studio time. And I'm doing this a little bit faster than I probably should. That's pattern number 1 right there. So when I get all the way done with that, I'm going to look back at my sheet. I'm going to think about pattern number 2. That's one way to think about this right here. If I flip back over here, we can kind of see through it. That's not a big deal. I've seen students also do this. I've seen students that will take and start drawing in a pattern, just starting on the side here. I'm going to start on the upper right side. And I'm going to stop right there. And this pattern that I'm drawing it looks simple starting off, but this pattern calls me to do a little dot in the center of all of these intersecting points here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a dot and all these intersecting points. So this is a second way you can approach this. Now I'm going to try to do one that's maybe a little bit more curvy, because this one's got a lot of straight lines right here. So I'm going to look through this here. Let's see. It looks like I could do possibly, I'm going to try to put this one that's called finery on the end of this right here. So I'm going to reference, I have to reference this because I can't do it without the reference. And I'm just drawing it how the handout is guiding me here. It's not exactly like the handout, nor will yours be exactly like the handout. And I'm just going to have it come off the edge right here. And it's got a little shape coming off the side here like this with some dots. And it looks like it's got a line that kind of follows that curve there. So that's a start right there. And you want to mix it up. You want to have, this would be a very light pattern right here, and you want to throw in some that have some nice darkness to it. So for those folks, this is your option right here with Zentangle, at least 8 patterns on the 6x9 sheet. I'm going to move on now. I'm not really going to draw this out, but I just wanted to show, for those that want to do form, there's a handout in the handout packet. And by the way, folks, the handout packets, we need to keep those handouts separated from your work folders. So make sure that all these handouts get into the handout folder. I'll have a separate one at the table, and we'll get those people who are my handout people to pick those up at the end. So this is another option right here. These are the forms with value, and I'll just go through it real quick. You could do large and small shapes, all the same. These are all circles with value. Notice that the cast shadow is on there. You could also choose to do a variety of shapes. You're going to do it on a little bit larger sheet of paper because this size for the Zentangle is not going to be big enough for you to fit those shapes. So you can draw them nice and large. This is a hard option right here. This right here is 1-point perspective. And unless you really know what you're doing, I would recommend maybe that if you want to do value but you're uncertain about how to do this thing we call 1-point perspective, and this one's even harder because it has, notice that these shapes are overlapping and they're getting smaller as they go towards the vanishing point. That's a harder option. So I would say if you're going to do that, really be confident in what you did with the value scale there. Then the last option here for folks, you're going to have a handout that looks like this. And this is the cube option. Right now it's flat, but in the final piece it's going to be put together. It's going to look like a 3D cube. Notice that I've got labeled on here A, and then A is right here, and it says line. B says put shapes in it. C says texture, that's down here. D says forms with value. E says represent space. We just did an exercise with the overlapping circles. And then F is something of your own choosing. You could draw just about anything in there. I would suggest with this one, as far as your reference, go back to the practice sheets to reference what you want to do. So for instance, in square A, you could start off by doing that interesting line that curves back and forth that never overlaps. It's really close to itself but never touches. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you get the idea. We've already done that. That could be an interesting way to do that. With the shapes, come on folks, this is just basic shapes. You can do organic shapes, you can do geometric shapes. Just find a way to make an interesting arrangement of shapes inside of this space right here. So that's shapes. Texture, I have a handout for that in the handout sheet. Forms with value, remember we did the sphere and we did the cube, and then you put the value I'm doing this with pen. It's a little bit harder to do it with pen. Right here. And the shadow comes off. I would say in this one, try to do about 5 or 6 shapes right here. In E, you could do overlapping. So I can put those same circles in, overlapping. And they can be getting smaller as they go up towards the top of the box. Or you could do the same thing with squares. You could have squares. You could just do a mixture of different shapes that are overlapping one another. And that would be a way to represent space. And F, your choice. Now, what I want you to do at this point, after I know it's taken me a while to get through all this, but what I want you to do right now, I want you to take your sheets that we've been working on, your practice sheet, I want you to flip it over, and I want you to write out, number one, I want you to write out what you want to do. So we're going to write out a plan. Before I give you a sheet of paper, I want to see a good plan. If you're going to do Zentangle, then I want you to write out, I'm doing Zentangle, and then I want you to tell me if you're going to divide up your space with a bunch of lines or if you're just going to start drawing into it and see where it goes. If you are doing the forms, if you're going to do the forms with value, I want to know which one you're going to pick so I can go back to this. So if you're doing this one on the back of your sheet, I want you to tell me which one are you going to try to do. You're going to try to do option 1 here with all the same, variety, 1 point perspective, or 1 point perspective with overlapping. And then if you're going to do the boxes here, I want you to write on the back that you're doing the boxes, and give me kind of give me an idea on the your choice. Okay, these I've already told you what to do, so give me an idea on the your choice. Write down, for my choice, I'm going to represent and then fill in the blank. Okay. Once you get a good plan, I will give you your sheet of paper. After today, we're in studio time where we're going to use our time wisely.